Welcome back to SMNI. This is Business and Politics. We're talking to COMELEC Chair George Garcia. Sir, on top of all of these things, you're also working to improve the integrity of elections. I think I've read somewhere that you're looking to redefine or maybe tighten the laws regarding vote buying. But this is one of the many initiatives that you are actually working on. Maybe give us a quick run-through about what are the things you're doing to ensure the integrity of the vote.
Of course, Sir Klink, central to all our electoral reform agenda is always the issue of transparency, accountability, and inclusivity of everything. We have to include everybody. We have to inform all the people, our people, of what is happening in the commission election, and we have to be very open as far as all our processes are concerned. We cannot keep any part of our process not seen or not heard by our people. So that's very, very important. Number two is there are certain legislative measures that need to be enacted immediately and ASAP. First, for example, we have an omnibus election code. We are using that omnibus election code, but it's circa 1985. Try to imagine a 1985 omnibus election code with Batasang Pambansa as Congress at that time, and you have a 1987 Constitution. And then we are also pushing, among other things, that we allow our elderly, the senior citizens, the PWDs, including the pregnant women, to vote ahead of anybody else. For example, let them vote one week before anybody else.
I noticed in the U.S., for example, Georgia, they're having early elections now. I guess they have a window rather than a specific date. Is that what you're proposing? I think the Constitution allows that, doesn't it?
Yeah, in fact, we are allowing the early voting for our media people.
That's correct.
We're also allowing early voting for our members of the armed forces, the PNP, and even the teachers who are serving in the precincts. Why can't we not allow?
So for the elderly and the pregnant women.
And they can vote for the national and even the local position. Just give them 1 week in advance the ballots. Let them cast them, so that they'll not be going to the second floor, third floor of an elementary school to cast their votes, or they will be falling in line together with other voters. The long queue will sometimes harass our senior citizens, our PWDs, and pregnant women. So let's give them additional more protection by allowing them to vote early. Likewise, perhaps it's high time we can open the debate now whether we should allow our OFWs, our Filipinos abroad, to vote via internet. The internet voting scheme. We have two modes right now for our overseas Filipinos. First is voting by going to the consulate or to the embassies, or number two, by mail. But unfortunately, this election of 2022, only about 40% of our Filipinos abroad registered and voted during the entire 1 month of the overseas voting. Why is that? Why is that happening when we are giving them all the entire 1 month, and we are giving them all the assistance? Maybe because they do not want to go to the embassies or go to the consulate, or maybe because it's not a holiday or in their respective areas, or their superiors does not want them to go to the polling places.
In the U.S., it's a big country. You have to travel in far distances just to visit either a consulate or the embassy in Washington, D.C.
Yes, if for example the voting center is in New York City and you're living in another state, then you're going to travel just to vote. So maybe internet voting is also should also be studied, and of course, campaign finance. Several
you have to tighten the rules there.
Of course, in campaign finance, and several other reforms that we have in mind. There are about 31 reform agenda that we want to push to Congress, so that at least by 2025, if these are all acted and passed, then we'll be able to ensure at least equal and level playing field for all our candidates.
I seem to remember that you have a specific initiative with regard to vote buying.
Yes.
I think with the definition, is that correct?
Somebody in Congress was actually proposing before that we increase the penalty for vote buying.
The penalty.
And I said that's of course very much acceptable, at the same time welcome. However, aside from the fact that we increase the penalty, maybe it's high time that we redefine what is the meaning of vote buying. our vote buying section 261 of the Omnibus Election Code is again circa 1985. And therefore, it does not cover yet the new modes of buying votes, like, for example, sending money using the GCash, PayMaya, or such other means by which you buy votes. So maybe we can cover that, because this will be taken advantage of by unscrupulous politicians.
I'm seeing also this trend, I don't know if it troubles you, of politicians running for a position and then they contract so many poll watchers. And yet not all of them can be accommodated at the precinct, right?
Yes.
But does it bother you that this is somehow maybe another way of vote buying, because you contract a family or maybe many members of the barangay to be your employees, as your agents?
That's vote buying, pure and simple.
Is that in the law now, or
that's not in the law?
Okay.
Try to imagine, Sir Klink, a precinct will have at least, you are a candidate, you will have 50 watchers. Okay. Not inside the precinct, but outside the precincts.
Right.
Just according to the so-called bantay balota. Just to do away with the provision of the law, or get away with the provision of the law. That's vote buying. If there are 100 precincts and you have 50 watchers per precinct, how many? There will be 5,000 watchers who will actually vote for you, because these are in your employ. These people will be receiving money from you. But technically, that's vote buying.
Another anecdote I've heard is that sometimes the payment is made for people not to vote. Well, what does the law say about that? Does that constitute as vote buying because they didn't influence an outcome? They did influence an outcome, but they didn't exercise.
That's negative voting, and therefore, when you say vote buying does not only refer to one being influenced to vote for somebody, but likewise to influence somebody not to vote for a candidate. That's still vote buying. Anything that is given of value should be considered vote buying, and therefore you will be asking, what about a T-shirt? What about a cup? What about a bowler? Will that constitute vote buying? The law is silent about that, and so therefore we have to redefine, and we have to impose a clearer and stiffer penalties for violation, and we have to likewise include conspiracy in order to prosecute.
That's interesting, because one of the criticisms in the past elections is the volume of disinformation. They call it fake news. Is that something? I wrote an editorial about it. But our premise is that it's so hard to legislate, because you may end up constraining free speech. But what is the discussion in COMELEC about disinformation?
My personal take, Sir Klink, is that, well, in the Philippines right now, we do not have social media regulation law.
Okay.
Well, of course, as you have mentioned, it will have to pass through certain constitutional and legal issues, and therefore that will be declared unconstitutional. But what I'm saying is, in order to prevent misinformation, troll farms, trolling, maybe we can criminalize trolling as a crime by itself, separate from cyber libel. Or number two, you can empower the COMELEC to control social media, at least during the period of campaign, because we do not know how much a candidate is spending in social media. Or number two, how a certain media platform are being used. Well, social media platforms are being used to attack somebody or to destroy the integrity of somebody. And take note, Sir Klink, if a troll is located outside of the Philippines,
then that's another layer of complication.
And therefore, you cannot prosecute, because the criminal law is always territorial in nature. It can only be applied within the territory of our country, but not outside of the Philippines. So these are the matters which should be discussed and should be included in one law in order to prevent misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. COMELEC is always a victim of fake news. We can protect ourselves. But how about a particular candidate? Can they protect themselves from fake news, misinformation, and disinformation?
Right. Well, you mentioned these outside forces. Of course, what we're seeing in the news also is some foreign governments, interfering with elections in a rival country. Is that concern COMELEC at all? Because we're not talking about a single wolf here in some basement somewhere. We're talking about government-funded projects that intentionally disrupt or maybe compromise the security of elections. Is that something that COMELEC is also looking at?
Yes, Sir Klink, it's always a concern, a valid concern. Ours is our election. It cannot be the election of anybody. Nobody should influence our election, most especially foreign intervention. Ours is an election. We have a commission election that ensure that whenever our people will vote, their votes will be counted and their votes are their genuine votes. That we will always guarantee. And therefore, definitely, whatever system we are going to adopt, this system should be a system which is controlled by the commission election, and only the COMELEC will have the final say as to who is really the victor in an election.
Right, but in the last national elections, 2022, were there any hints or concerns that there may be foreign interference, or that was not an issue at all the last one?
Fortunately, during the last election, no such issue was raised, but at the same time,
so
there
one
were
less problem to...
Yes, but there were certain issues regarding...
But it doesn't guarantee the future, right?
Of course, of course. And so therefore, the COMELEC must always guarantee that the system cannot be hacked. The system will always be protected.
Right. Well, Chairman, your time is valuable, and we appreciate you making time for us. But before we go, perhaps you'd like to give a message to our viewers.
Yes, we'd like to assure our viewers, and of course, but we would like to thank first Business and Politics, and of course, Manila Times and SMNI, the entire crew, the producers and staff. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. We'd like to encourage our voters, our fellow men, the Filipino people, to not only vote, but likewise first register as a voter. You will not be able to vote if you are not a registered voter. If the election will not push through by December, and because the law says we'll be pushing the election by October of next year, then register beginning the last week of November up to the last week of May. Don't wait for May. Don't line up. That you will be added as in the long queue of those who wanted to register. The better option is to be a better Filipino citizen, register early, and at the same time, vote whenever there is an electoral exercise. And please trust your commission election. We are here to perform a constitutional duty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank also our viewers, those watching this program live, and those watching the replay. I'd also thank Pastor Apollo Kibuloy for making this program possible. This has been Business and Politics. I'm Dante Klink, and I'll see you